Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Roger Moore became James Bond later in his acting career, but he gave the audience another version of Bond they could love. Still, what if we told you he wasn't just known to be a goofier Bond? There's more depth to Sir Roger Moore. Why Roger Moore couldn't control his wandering pee-pee. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. While Roger Moore's James Bond has comedic elements, his life had moments of deep sadness, one of which was when he lost his daughter. Stepdaughter, if we are being specific, but to Roger, it didn't matter. He had a heart that was ready to love, and a blood relationship wasn't a requirement. Plus, he had experience on when building relationships with stepchildren. Christina Knudsen, the daughter of his fourth and final wife, Christina Kiki Tholstrup, who Roger fondly called his lifeline despite marrying thrice before. His marriages would make for some of the best drama shows with the events that took place within them. His wives from his first 3 marriages were passionate women who usually teetered on the extreme. There were betrayals, spying and arguments. Roger wasn't blameless in all of it. His first marriage was when in his late teens. It took place when he was still in the army as part of his national service. He had his first leave in December 1946 and got married to Lucy Woodard, popularly Dawn Van Steen, a 25-year-old divorced single mum ice skater he met when he was in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. When the two first met, Roger keeled over completely for this hot-headed, talented ice skating woman. He even took ice skating lessons so he could be closer to her. The passion remained when he went on his national service. He would send letters continually declaring his love for his angel puss, and when he wouldn't get a response from her, he felt miserable. So he quickly married her during his first leave from the army. There wasn't time for a honeymoon, and they didn't even have money for one if they wanted to. The couple, along with Dawn's son, moved to her sister's house, living in the attic, although they later moved to better accommodation after some time. Shortly after his marriage to the ice skater, their marriage began to get tested. His wife had immense ambitions and wanted to take her craft abroad. She informed the still serving in the army Roger, who wasn't keen on his wife's decision. Initially, Roger tried to charm her with his letters, and as that didn't work, he asked her to allow him to be discharged from the army and for her to stop her silliness if she truly loved him. Little did he know that he should have cherished the silliness. The events that followed were beyond dire. Their marriage balanced unsteadily while their ambitions poked it. For Dawn, she wasn't mostly around, leaving the esteemed Bond actor to babysit her son. After all, he wasn't getting serious roles, and it wouldn't hurt if she gave him one. But the ice skater was less than pleased by a stagnant Moore who failed auditions after auditions. Her displeasure would erupt in the form of harsh words at Roger's looks. "You'll never be an actor. Your face is too weak, your jaw is too big, and your mouth's too small." Her assessment was wrong, as his looks and potential star power created a pathway for his success. However, then she looked to be right. Things weren't looking good for the beloved legendary Bond actor. The closest he got to acting was when he modelled as the romantic hero in a photographic story magazine for women. There was also the time that he was a knitwear model. Yeah, things weren't good for the suave actor. When words weren't enough, Dawn would go extreme, telling the actor to leave the house in wet clothes and other antics. Funny how despite all of this, Dawn was also wary of her husband. She suspected that he was cheating on her with a woman who was far more than a star than her, Dorothy Squires. While Moore admitted that he found solace in the arms of another woman truly, he claimed it wasn't with Dorothy. Moore said a maid caught him in the hotel with the woman that gave him solace, and this maid gave evidence against him. He did meet Squires after this incident, or so he claimed. However, Dawn saw it differently, and she wrote a book detailing how differently she saw things, but a fire would claim the manuscript, which meant her version of things would be lost in time. Or would it? The manuscript was gone, but something provided insight into what we could have found inside it. This something was the divorce petition. After years, an old box containing this petition, among other things, was discovered. From the petition, some new facts have come to light, and it looks like Roger lied. According to Dawn's petition, the woman that sped up the loss of her marriage was in fact Dorothy Squires. Dorothy claimed she followed the two until they entered Dorothy's car, and she opened the door on them. According to the ice skater, her soon-to-be ex-husband chased her away, but she wasn't going to be deterred. Dawn hired 2 men and enlisted the help of her mother to find out what was going on between Squires and Moore. She found the Moore she was looking for soon enough, when she tracked the two to Dorothy's home, but it wasn't the passionate love-making she thought she'd find. Dawn had hired 2 hired hands, placed a ladder next to the window of Dorothy's room. In her petition she wrote that one of the men climbed up the ladder and saw the two embracing on Squire's bed. Dawn tried to confirm, but when she climbed up she couldn't see them on the bed. Squire saw her face and raised an alarm. Moore came dashing out, the button of his shirt loosened on a pantless bottom. With these proofs the ice skater got her divorce, but for her and Roger Moore this was just the beginning. Their marriages mirrored each other. However, only one ended up finding peace. "Madam, you're bleeding," law enforcement authorities said, and Dorothy Squires, the singer, Roger Moore's second wife, responded, "It's my heart that's bleeding." So, who is Roger Moore that made a woman's heart bleed? We know Moore is a suave gentleman that got into the pants of many women who didn't care if he was married, but having a wandering member isn't just what Moore was about. He was a kind person, and an example of his kindness emerged in how he dealt with Sean Van Steen. Sean Van Steen was the son of his first wife, Dawn, the ice skater, but due to Dawn's work she was rarely around, leaving Sean and the strong-jawed Bond actor at home. Sean, who grew up to become an artist and a photographer, had this to say about Moore. "In many ways he was more of a parent than my mother. He was the only father I ever knew." He wasn't exaggerating, and the impact of Roger was so intense and interesting that the boy, who was 3, Roger married his mother and, around 10 when they divorced, remembered some events vividly. Sean was born during World War II, and during the Hitler's bombings, the then little boy lost his hearing, but Sean remembered Roger to be kind and patient in using signs to talk to him. Roger, whose acting career had never taken off despite his efforts, never lashed out at Sean out of frustration. He remained loving and took Sean out from time to time. One of their notable outdoor adventures was when Roger took Sean to where he could sail his toy boat. Still, despite things becoming sour between Roger and Dawn, Sean was kept out of it, and to prevent the boy from being in the middle of it, the on-screen James Bond would take the boy on a walk. They would walk around till the boy's mother cooled. A true knight in shining armour he was, and guess what? He was later knighted. The basis of his knighthood? Kindness. We'll get into that soon. Roger remained a fixture in Sean's development, that even when the boy had the surgery that restored his hearing, Moore was by his bedside as he opened his eyes. The legendary actor held with him an album of songs for the boy's listening pleasure. Mr. Van Steen only has pleasant memories of the James Bond actor. He was fond of the time he and Moore spent together. Looking back at those times, he said, "It was pretty extraordinary how kind and patient he was with me, given how young he was." It was true, young men went about testing their virility or having intense parties and doing activities that could easily snuff out their lives. However, Moore wasn't like most men. His penis wandered, but he still didn't mind having the responsibility of taking care of Sean. It was his wandering penis that formed the basis of Dawn's divorce from him. The woman who was the recipient of Moore's bobbing member was Dorothy Squires, who he later married. Phew! That marriage had more turbulent moments in it than a stormy sea. But before we discuss their marriage, let's discuss Moore. We already know he is kind, but was kindness something he got from childhood or something he had to learn on his own? Roger Moore was born in Stockwell, London, United Kingdom, on 14th of October 1927, to Lillian Moore, the daughter of a general, and George Alfred Moore, a police constable. They weren't poor, but also not rich. They scraped by, but not barely. Roger was their only child, and boy was he infused with all the love they could give. Little wonder Roger grew up to be a hopeless romantic. However, it wasn't only women Roger loved. The James Bond actor was passionate about cinematic art. This inspired his first job as an apprenticed cartoonist at an animation film company, but just Roger Moore met with misfortune not long after. He had the passion and excitement for the job, but not the presence of mind. Animation film companies require a great deal of concentration. A tiny slip could mean poof. Down went animation cells. Roger had that slip in concentration which the company didn't forgive. They chucked Roger out immediately, bemoaning the loss of their animation cells. He didn't stay down for long, as his father, the cop, used his job as a law enforcement personnel to get his son an acting gig. No, it wasn't as you think. George didn't force some director to give his son a role. However, in responding to a crime at the home of director Brian Desmond Hurst, one of the leading directors at the time, the older Moore used the opportunity to introduce his son. George went on about how his son loved acting, that the director found the boy a small part in his upcoming flick, Caesar and Cleopatra. All Roger did was lift a spear, which turned out to be enough. He stood out from the other extras. His glittering, piercing blue eyes, 6'4" height, and wavy golden locks made him a target of female attention. Hurst loved the potential he saw before him and decided to enrol the actor in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. Hurst covered the bills, and Moore had the scholarship of his life, but he would be out of the academy in a year, choosing to pursue a woman's attention. He and the woman would divorce. But at the academy, Roger absorbed lessons like a sponge does water. He developed his acting style and created a smooth-talking persona that his audience couldn't get enough of. His style of saying, "My name's Bond, James Bond," made a lot of people wet in certain southern places of their bodies. However, when he left his first wife, his career still hadn't taken. His second wife, Dorothy Squires, 13 years older than him, helped his career bloom. When they married, they moved to America for 2 reasons. Squires wanted to revive her dwindling fortunes as a singer and wanted to introduce her younger husband to top Hollywood execs. Roger's fortune dramatically improved, while that of his wife's plummeted like a rock crashing down into the sea. It wasn't pretty, and soon she too stopped acting pretty. After losing multiple pregnancies along with her career, civility became scarce with her. It didn't help that she felt insecure about her husband. She knew he could strike a relationship outside of their marriage, and he did. Fearing that they would end up divorcing, she forced them to return to the United Kingdom. Still, it didn't stop Roger from betraying her. Honestly, with Louisa Mattiola's looks, there was no man who could resist her, whether she was actively seducing them or not. The 7 times James Bond bonded with her in more ways than one. Then he left Squires for Louisa. Squires battled him every step of the way, refusing to give him a divorce. But her soon-to-be ex-husband wasn't miserable. He had just scored his biggest role yet. He had become Simon Templar, a secret agent who is not too dissimilar to the type of character James Bond was. Simon Templar was the leading character in the TV version of The Saint, and it prepared the path for Roger to become Bond, which, ironically, he had rejected before because he wanted Connery to see his Bond to a conclusion. When The Saint ended, Moore had become an international star, and Dorothy finally divorced him that same year. He married his long-time lover, Louisa Mattioli, who, like his previous wives, had massive spunk in her. The two would go on to spend 25 years together. They had 3 children, and within this period he played James Bond 7 times, beginning a different type of Bond to the cinema. He was 47 when he began, and he had to alter his looks a lot for the film. First and most important was getting into shape, then losing some of his locks. It was a challenging process, but the skilled actor pulled it off despite hating every process. Moore's Bond wasn't a continuation of his Simon Templar character from The Saint. Also, it wasn't a continuation of Sean Connery's Bond. Roger's Bond was an extension of how Roger was in real life. Charming, witty, and oozing charisma. No Bond girl stood a chance. Moore was comedic, and according to director Lew Grade, Moore was closer to Ian Fleming's mindset of how Bond should be. The audience loved Moore with his version of Bond, but he began to want out as he felt like a dirty grandpa. The girls were getting younger and he older, which made him feel awkward. Just like his time as Bond ended, his marriage to Louisa did too, after 25 years, with Roger snuggling up with Louisa's best friend, Christina Kiki Tholstrup. They bonded around the time that Moore was treating his prostate cancer. Tholstrup had survived cancer before. Their bonding made Roger realise he didn't love Louisa any more. As he had done in previous marriages, he also left Louisa. Happiness had come in another form for him, and it came in the shape of Kiki. Louisa didn't take kindly to this. After being together with Roger for 7 years before eventually marrying him for 25, she wasn't about to easily let go, but she did eventually. Her acceptance of letting go cost Roger £10 million, but it wasn't a high price to pay for his happiness. He stayed with Kiki for the remainder of his years before cancer returned to ravage his body and claim his life. Roger Moore has made a mark not just in cinema but life. Moore became heavily involved in charity and helped to raise funds for UNICEF. He travelled to help children in crisis, and in 1999 the Queen named him a CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire. In 2003 the Queen also knighted him. Roger Moore wasn't just a star. He was the sun that warmed the world. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. It is always a challenge for a successful Hollywood man to resist women. What was Charles Boyer's secret to magnetize women? Watch this video.